We're going to talk about the Great War today. This is, of course, World War I. We try to put this in context. It's difficult because it is such a huge event in history that tends to set the table for the rest of the 20th century. But we can put it in one context that I can think of, and that's what some historians refer to as the end of the long 19th century. Now, the Great War starts in 1914. The last time that all of Europe was engaged in a general war was 1815, 99 years earlier. 1815, of course, ends the Napoleonic Wars. So we go nearly a century without war, without a general war in Europe. There are small local wars, but no general war. World War I is the punctuation mark to the end of that long 19th century. So you could put it in that context. It has a number of significances. I'll talk about them now. The Great War is significant, and I refer you to the images and maps that accompany these lectures so you can understand what I'm talking about. The Great War is going to result in the destruction of the four great empires of Europe: the German Empire, the Austro-Hungarian, the Russian, and the Ottoman. These are going to be dismantled, and new, small, weak countries are going to be put in their place. These new, small, weak countries will be the seeds of the Second World War. Another consequence or significance, the Russian Revolution arises out of the First World War, the creation of the Soviet Union, the world's first communist country. Another significance, we see truly the rise of the United States here as a world power as it participates in the war and goes to Versailles with a great deal of power, or at least President Wilson believes he has a great deal of power. Another significance of the war would be a technological significance. The war is going to produce, or at least employ, a vast number of weapon systems that we have perfected today and still enjoy. Tanks. The original tank, of course, was nothing but a metal box that acted as an escort to infantry across no man's land. Later, a turret and a cannon would be applied to the tank to make it an offensive weapon. We have poisonous gas used here. We have long-range artillery. The airplane was invented about, a decade before the war started, and we're already using the airplane for reconnaissance and for bombing. Submarines. Submarines are going to sink ships in the Atlantic. This, of course, will bring the United States into the war in 1917. The machine gun is probably the dominant weapon of the war. It makes the war a very defensive war. Let's face it, one guy with a 50 caliber machine gun and plenty of ammunition can hold off a small village by himself if he's properly protected. So we have just a large variety of technological changes taking place here to fight this war in weapons. Now, I want to do this lecture by talking about long-term causes of the war, the short-term or immediate causes. We'll fight the war briefly, and then we'll talk about the settlement of the war, the Versailles Treaty. Long-term causes, I'm just going to go through these one by one, try to give you a sense of their significance. The first long-term cause would be German unification. Germany was created, the modern state of Germany was created in 1870 by Bismarck. He had cobbled together a large number of independent kingdoms and principalities and states and created what we think of today as Germany. Now, the unification of Germany is going to be perceived as a potential threat to the rest of Europe. Suddenly, in the middle of Europe, you have a new, powerful country with the largest military capability on the continent, with almost unlimited economic power, increasing political power, large population, well-educated. Suddenly, here in the heart of Europe, instead of these small Germanic states, you have a unified German empire. This is going to frighten Germany's neighbors. They're not quite sure what this new Germany is going to be like. Is she going to be aggressive? Is she going to try to dominate the continent? So keep this in mind. The unification of Germany is an unbalancing of Europe. Second long-term cause. The second long-term cause I would describe as militarism. There's an increasing display of martial might on the continent, not just in Germany, but in other countries as well. The leadership will tend to dress in military uniforms. You see marching bands and you see displays of military power. Increasingly, there's a sense that perhaps the military power is the best way to solve political problems. So militarism is an important long-term cause. Third, imperialism. Now, we talked about imperialism earlier in this class. Imperialism is a long-term cause for a couple of reasons. As Lenin argued, the great industrial powers are going to compete for scarce natural resources, for cheap labor, for markets to sell their products. This is all true, but there's something else here. There's a creation of bitterness and suspicion between the great powers as their empires collide overseas, whether in Asia or in Africa. And let's face it, a conflict between a British and a French unit somewhere in the middle of Africa could rebound to Europe and produce a conflict between the mother countries. So the competition, suspicion, bitterness over imperial projects is a long-term cause of the Great War. Another long-term cause, nationalism. Nationalism is ostensibly an easy concept. You think of it as sort of a fervent patriotism, but we have to go a little bit deeper. You'll notice the photograph that I've included here of a crowd. It's in Munich. The war has been announced. It's probably the 1st of August, 1914. And a crowd is gathered in a public square, and the word has gone forth that Germany has declared war on Russia. You see the crowd's quite excited. And you see the one gentleman who's highlighted here is a young Adolf Hitler. This is one of the few photographs you can find of Hitler in which he's actually smiling. He is excited as the rest of the crowd, the thought that Germany is going to war. Nationalism has in it a sense of people identifying with their nation, not so much with their village anymore, not so much with the province from which they were born, but with their nation. There's an imagined community out there that's, we like to think, shares our interest and our beliefs. So people begin to identify with their nation as opposed to a more local identification. Nationalism also has about it a sense that these modern European governments can access the resources of their country, manpower and natural resources for war-making powers. So nationalism is a powerful psychological factor in the long-term causes of the Great War. Another long-term cause is panslavism, and that's hyphenated. Panslavism, pan the prefix meaning all or across. Panslavism, and again I refer you to the maps that accompany this. I urge you to look at them so you can understand this concept. Panslavism is a concept created by the Russians, whereby Russia, being the largest of the Slavic-speaking peoples of Europe, takes it upon herself to protect her little Slavic brothers if they get in trouble. This is going to be especially important in 1914 because a small Slavic country, Serbia, will indeed get into big trouble. And her bigger Slavic brother, Russia, is going to come to her aid. This is what will trigger the Great War. And we'll look at this in more detail. Another cause of the Great War is the alliance system itself. And I urge you to look at the first map here on this section of World War I. And you can see the map makers have color-coded the alliances. And you can see there are two primary alliances. The Allies, we often call them, comprised of France, Great Britain, and Russia. Also called the Triple Entente, or the Three Friends. And then you see the Central Powers. These are and you can see they're arrayed across Central Europe, so their name is obvious. The German Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and the Ottoman Empire. These are the two great alliances that are going to fight this war. If you think about these alliances, there are some oddities to them. The Central Powers, there is a cultural and language affiliation, obviously, between the Germans and the Austrians. Between the Ottomans and the Ottoman Empire and the Germans and Austro-Hungarians, it's less obvious why they would join. The Ottomans throw in their lot with the Germans because they believe that Germany is the most powerful country. They will win the war and they will destroy Russia, Russia being the Ottomans' primary enemy. Now, look at the other side, the Triple Entente. Here we have three very odd partners coming together in a military alliance. You couldn't find two countries more different than France and Russia. France, a modern, liberal country, a market economy, sophisticated communications, and technology, democratic style government. And then you have Russia, a despotic government, the poorest country in Europe, dominated by illiterate farmers, run by the Tsar and his police. Two countries on the opposite ends of the political spectrum, yet they form an alliance. Why? It's very simple. Fear of Germany. You see quite plainly that Germany is situated directly between Russia and France, and it is this geographic problem which brings Russia and France together, the common fear of Germany. How about Great Britain? Why would Great Britain join this alliance? If you think about the relationship between Great Britain and France over the centuries, it's one of great hostility. The 100 Years' War fought between the British and the French. The 7 Years' War, the French and Indian War, fought between the British and the French. They were on opposite sides in the American Revolution. The British and the French fought for a generation in the wars of the French Revolution and the Napoleonic Wars. So you have a history of great bitterness and suspicion between these two powers, yet they come together here. And the reason is obvious: fear of Germany. The British feel increasingly threatened by the Germans, and they throw in their lot with France and with Russia. Now, I'm going to mention one other long-term cause here before we take a break, and that is the nationality problem in Austria-Hungary. And again, I refer you to the maps that I've supplied for you. You'll see that Austria-Hungary is just a polyglot of different nationalities. I can count 12 or 14 just glancing at the map here. Austria-Hungary dominated by the Germans and the Hungarians, you see in red and green. And then you see a wide variety of other ethnic groups, language groups, Poles and Czechs and Slovaks and Italians and Romanians and Slavs and on and on and on. The problem here with Austria-Hungary, of course, is that if any of these local ethnic or language groups were to break away from the empire, it would provide a very dangerous example for the others. And you might see Austria-Hungary fly to pieces, sort of disintegrate, if the various ethnic groups were to form their own countries or leave the empire to rejoin their mother countries. So these are some of the long-term causes. I'll touch on a couple of others in our next section, and then we'll talk about the immediate or short-term causes of the war. Thank you.